This video project, an emergency management primer for elected and appointed officials, was produced by Team Lighthouse as part of the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative, Cohort 15.
Something bad will happen during your tenure. I can't tell you what it's going to be. And it will test your leadership skills.
This video highlights the critical elements of emergency management for newly elected and appointed officials. It draws on experiences from elected officials and first responders who have dealt with crisis. It is a primer for your success. The greatest expectation for you will be to build collaboration across the crisis. To do that, you must make emergency management a priority.
If you are successful with emergency events that come upon you, it can really help not only your image, but the coordination and the good functioning of government and the bureaucracy.
There's a tendency for public officials to sort of ignore give subject matter expertise to their public safety teams and sort of think they have it. And then when the crisis happens, and inevitably it's a political crisis, they then get very engaged. And there has to be an in-between. I mean, what I've often said to a governor or a president who I've worked for is you may not win elections on emergency management, but you can certainly lose them on it.
I think it's important for an elected official to appreciate that he or she cannot delegate all of the responsibility for dealing with an emergency. And the greater the calamity, the more expectation I think there will be in the public and among the emergency management leadership that the elected official will be present.
I think the only way to manage that inevitable conflict between, both guiding but also needing to review and supervise and criticize is to have a baseline of understanding. Because I'll tell you now, in the crisis, things will look really bad and you'll think everything's going wrong, right? I mean, I have to remind people in disasters, it's called a disaster for a reason, right? It looks messy, ugly, bad things are happening. It takes time to be able to manage the mayhem. So without that baseline understanding, you will not be able to guide nor criticize, which is the right of any elected official.
County judge, if we do our job routinely, don't get a lot of attention, but it's always in the crisis that you get the attention.
You will face a crisis during your term. How will you lead in that moment?
You will encounter a crisis. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how big, how long. And live your life, right? And govern knowing that fact. And if that's true, ask yourself, what do I wish I knew about what could happen, about the risk facing this community, about what investments we've made to minimize that risk, what will happen when something bad does happen, what's anticipated of me, what should my appropriate role be.
Anybody who runs for office or seeks public office, they're doing it because hopefully they want to accomplish this or this or this. The problem is other things are going to intervene, and emergencies intervene. And the advice I was given by Judge Eccles, my predecessor, was correct. This is likely to have more impact on how you're perceived by the public, and it's we don't get to choose that battlefield. It comes to us.
It's a fine line that political officials, elected officials, really have to walk each and every day. So when there's an emergent situation, their constituents are probably being faced with the worst day that they've ever experienced.
A crisis will require your best. Are you ready to lead?
We look to that one person to say, we trust you, we have faith in you to take charge and pour all of our resources into the right place at the right time. Well, it's incumbent upon you and your position to understand your limits, your left and right limits, and where you can bend those limits, but where you break those limits. And as an individual that's responding and in charge of a very localized response, you've got to have your individual knowledge on what you can do and can't do.
Servant leadership is humble. You're not pretending to have all the answers. One of the things you learn about emergency management is that you have to make decisions with imperfect and incomplete information. And that is humbling. I think the most important thing for an elected official to focus on in an emergency is the dimension of leadership that I describe as servant leadership, which is what do you need to do to support the professionals whose job it is to be first responders, to help in the recovery, to deal with all of the dimensions of an emergency.
Dream on if you think that you'll never encounter a crisis. Now, it may not be the size of BP or Hurricane Katrina or a major earthquake, but it will be something. And unless you're ready, your teams will not be ready. They need you in that moment. They need you to lead and guide them, but also your responsibility to the people who elected you. You can't simply delegate the fundamental responsibility of safety and security.
Understanding the situation requires the ability to identify, process, and comprehend critical elements of information.
One of the banes of my existence, if you will, are all the politicians who suddenly want to get involved because there is a crisis, and they want to give advice, or they want to say, well, you got to do this or you got to do that. And they're coming down from Washington or Austin or wherever, and they don't have the information and they don't have the background. And sometimes dealing with them is a problem.
Allow me or allow us to find out what we have and be patient until we can figure it out ourselves, and then let's educate each other on the process as we move forward.
And that education and training on what capability and capacity you have is so important so that when the time comes and you're asked to respond as a leader, you can ask for the right things at the right time.
Is ask, what are the things that keep your team up late at night? What are the primary risks based on, your geography? Some mayors have to worry about earthquakes, others do not. So if you're in the Gulf, you're worried about hurricanes, but maybe less so about earthquakes. What are the primary risks that your team is planning for? Do those risks make sense to you? And what investments have they made to minimize that risk and to also prepare should it come to pass? Those are the fundamental questions. And they're going to be geographic based, they're going to be local based, they might be political based a little bit.
Your team has a plan and needs your support. Be involved.
I think that elected officials should have a basic understanding of the various types of emergency response that you'll have in any type of crisis.
Well, I think the role of the elected official well in advance of an emergency is to ask a lot of questions. And that's not about setting off panic. It's really about asking your team what they have prepared for and how they have prepared for it. What is the plan? How do we think about different kinds of emergencies? I think what I'd recommend to newly elected officials is three things. First of all, meet the team. The second is learn the plan. There probably is one. It may be complete or not, it may be perfect or not, but learn it and understand what's in place. And the third is practice. There's nothing like tabletop exercises to tease out not just what to do, but how you feel in the moment, and understanding and controlling those kinds of factors, anticipating those kinds of factors, I think is enormously important.
The most important investment, I believe, is going to be in planning for the response. That is how societies are judged, and that's, I think, how elected officials should be judged. The fundamental thing that an elected official needs to understand is how will it work after the thing happens, after the boom, the hurricane, the bombing, the fire, whatever it's going to be. And without understanding what that process looks like, it will be very hard to judge whether it's successful or not.
My view is elected officials are going to know something about processes that we in emergency planning or public safety will not be aware of. Elected officials might know the parts of a certain intersection that need to be opened first if we had something to do. They may know the constituents that operate businesses in these areas, there may be a logistical problem that they're more aware of, or they have an opportunity to speak with the people that would be impacted by it, and they can inform us that this won't work because of these concerns here. And that's some of the things. No plan is perfect, but it's good to have a plan. It's better to have a plan than not. But if they're involved in the planning process, we're all more educated when it comes to playing it out, should you ever have to use it.
You can't just suddenly, at the last minute, jump up and put something together. It's got to be an ongoing situation, and I would encourage everybody, make sure you have your plans in place, and everybody knows what their job is, because, and when all hell breaks loose, you're ready.
During that, those first couple of days after the marathon bombing, I went around to visit the hospitals to check in on the injured and also to check in on the medical personnel, because there was an impact on them as well. And remember, we had hundreds of people, many of whom had life-threatening injuries, and not one of whom who made it to hospital was lost. And in a conference with the leadership of one of the hospitals, and the nursing leadership, the medical leadership, the surgical leadership were all in the room, and they were talking about how the injured were triaged in such a way that the right injury, if you will, went to the right hospital. No hospital was overwhelmed. It all happened efficiently, and that was the reason people survived. And I said, well, that's marvelous. And the president of the hospital said, well, we just executed your plan. And I said, really? And they said, well, yes. One of the things that came down soon after you took office was that we, as a medical community, should figure out what we do in the case of a calamity in the greater Boston area.
Build trust with responders. We are all on the same team.
I think the unity of effort between the elected officials and the response to the bombings at the Boston Marathon worked so well because of relationships that were built beforehand. It was a trust in the ability of each other to do their work and to operate well. It was a trust in the system, in the fact that the police had a plan in place, fire had a plan in place, the military had a plan in place. We were all working together from past experience and knowing each other and being comfortable.
Well, there's a terrible temptation, I think, that executive political leaders have faced, that is to feel like it's up to them to make all the decisions, rather than to support the decisions of the people who were trained to make them. And to make sure that there is coherence in those decisions, to ask important questions, but not to be the one who makes the decisions, because it slows things down. I think the most important thing to do is to prepare, and mindful that there are professionals in the organization whose job it is to anticipate and prepare for different kinds of calamities. It's enormously important to be familiar with those people and those plans, and it helps.
I have the title Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for the third largest county in the United States. But the reality is, if I can't trust other people to make decisions and act, then the whole system's not going to work. Then I've got to surround myself with people who this is their full-time job, and that they give me the accurate information that I can convey to the public.
Take the politics out of it. Now is not the time.
You give me a crisis that's not going to have politics, around it, guiding it, undermining it, whatever else, and I would like to move to that place, except for it won't be a democracy. Democracy is messy and noisy, and we love it, but it also has to be managed in a crisis.
Because of politics, when I came in, I had one elected official at the state level tell me, your job's to make the mayor look bad. It was Bill White at the time. I said, no, that's not my job. My job's to work with whoever is the mayor. Doesn't matter whether I like them, agree with them, or anything. The public's got to see a unified effort.
Events, crisis situations, they're it's a nonpartisan situation. So really approaching those events, approaching those elected officials that might be from different parties, it's really important to focus on what everyone is most concerned about, and that's the life and safety of the public.
When we're engaging in a response to any kind of emergency, whether it's a weather emergency or an infectious disease emergency or a terrorist event, it's at the intersection of science and politics. So I don't think it's possible to keep politics out of it. But as a health department, our particular role is to ensure that we hew to the science. And that's the source of our credibility and the source of our contribution. There are many reasons that people become concerned. There may be greater vulnerability in some communities than others for reasons that aren't fair. That's politics, but it's also part of the science. So for me, that's the North Star, the science.
You know, sometimes people they think or they experience a line between the responsibility of an elected official to his or her constituents, the voters, and a responsibility to support the emergency response professionals. I don't think there's a line between the two. I think they are exactly the same.
During Hurricane Ike, when something was going wrong, I don't even remember what it was particularly, one reporter kept badgering, who's to blame for this, who's to blame for this, and, finally I, pulled my reading glasses down and looked over at her, and I won't call her by name on camera now, but I said, we don't need to figure out we just need to solve the problem right now. We'll figure out who to blame later on. We never did even get back to worrying about the blame aspect.
Of the many happy breaks we had in the aftermath of the bombing, not the least of which was that everybody stepped up. Everybody brought their best. All the professionals and the regular citizens, they brought their best. I think that how we communicated the importance of turning to rather than on each other was a part of our success. We didn't succumb to panic, and we didn't let our fear overtake us, and we understood that you could be vigilant without being afraid. And I think that in an open society and a society dedicated to the values of freedom and fair play, to which our society is dedicated, those are profoundly important messages to start to communicate right away, before fear takes hold.
Collaboration requires solid relationships. Relationships are built on trust in your team.
There is power in asking questions, getting your teams together and starting by asking the question, is everybody in the room who ought to be in the room? And then going around the room and asking each, how have you thought about which kinds of emergencies, and whom have you talked to, and who do you work with on that, and is there a plan, and what's my role in that plan?
So in the end, the communities really are very resilient, and they really help themselves in a lot of cases. So to add that positive energy must be taken on by the elected leadership and the appointed leadership to say, you can do this, we can help you, together we can get to a better place and get through this.
So it really is a case of a united front in responding to an emergency, and respect across sectors of government. If there's any time when we can be sure to see that in New York, it's during an emergency.
Because no one person, no one office is going to deal with a disaster. So you've got to have that cooperative spirit.
Understanding who's going to be the lead agency in charge, that's really the most important thing to understand for both emergency management and elected officials.
But it's enormously important that you coordinate and you support. And many of much of that coordination and some of that support will require your being responsible for cutting out the red tape and the barriers that might normally exist between those different agencies. I remember getting all the heads of the agencies together, and I said, okay, we have different parts of this, and a big part of this is solving this crime. I said, everyone has a role, but when any agency is going to be in charge. And I said, I don't care which one of you it is, but we're going to decide right now who's in charge of this criminal investigation. And we talked about it a little while, and everyone said, well, it seems like it ought to be the FBI, the best position for this. And I said to the head of the FBI SAC who was there, I said, is that okay with you? He said, yes. And I looked every other agency head in the eye, and I said, are you on board? Are you on board? Are you on board? And they all said yes. And on the whole, that stuck. And it mattered.
Unity of message is a byproduct of collaboration. Rally around a common cause.
So in any type of a crisis, in any type of response, media will be present. Media will be searching for whatever they can get to put out on the news, to put out there. The biggest and most important thing to keep from driving a wedge through the elected officials, through the responding parties, the emergency responders, and through the constituents, is to speak with one voice and one message.
You have an important role, particularly as in an executive position, in communicating. And it's important that the communication be uniform, it be calming. It's enormously important to appreciate the importance of your own presence at an emergency. What signals the general public takes from how you're behaving.
Whenever we have an emergency, and these are always unexpected, we're functioning with incomplete information and a high level of uncertainty. And that raises real issues about how to communicate with both the public and with elected officials. Everybody wants answers, but we don't always have them. And elected officials feel that they should be the repository of knowledge, but they have to live with uncertainty. My experience has been that the best strategy is to tell people the truth, that a situation is evolving. This is what we understand now. This is what we're concerned about now, and that we will continue to let you know as our understanding of the situation grows, as we learn more. And that's really what we owe to the public. We don't want to scare people, we don't want to speculate needlessly, and we don't want to lie to them, because that would be a great betrayal of the public trust.
I guess my first job is to make sure I have the right people in the right positions to be doing their job. And then they and the first responders and all those people do theirs. Mine is to communicate with the public, to make sure the public has correct and clear information, even if it's information they might not like.
And the media certainly wants to report the news. They have an insatiable desire to get as many facts as they can and then report that on the news and provide that to the public. And the elected officials and the appointed officials can be very much a part of that by adding value to the response by saying, as soon as they can, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, and this is what we're trying to achieve.
The role of an elected official during a crisis response is really to help echo our message to the public. We work very, very hard with all of the partners that are working with us in an emergent situation to ensure we have a unified message that's going out to the public.
Elected officials are a voice of the emergency planners, of the emergency management people when it comes to working with constituents. If an elected official goes out there and is talking about a process that hasn't taken place yet or that is not going to take place, we could be taking 2 steps forward to go 4 steps back.
That you say what you know and not what you don't, that you avoid speculation, which can be really damaging when you're trying to deal with an uncertain situation, and that you project calm but confidence that you'll get to the right answer. I think that turns out to be pretty good politics as well as pretty good leadership.
A smooth transition from response to recovery depends on the long view.
I think the primary role with recovery and mitigation is not to walk away. I think, after the, craziness is over and things get back to semi-normal, there's a tendency to think, oh, people will get paid their money, insurance will come in, and it's all done. One of the largest responsibilities for mayors and governors is to prepare for the next event.
When it comes to recovery and mitigation, that's really a longer term involvement. And so to pay attention to that, to give that as much attention as you do a response situation is what will be most beneficial and most memorable for the constituents, because that's when the hard work starts.
In the recovery phase, once again, elected officials are going to be aware of constituent needs long before it gets to emergency management personnel. They have people, basically boots on the ground that are listening to what these needs
There is
are.
the time that comes when recovery is continuing and the cameras are gone. And for me, that's a particularly important time for a health department, that we don't take our foot off the gas, that we stay there as long as there's a health threat. But it is true that often communities feel that the recovery period doesn't last nearly as long as the public interest. And we need to take that into account in our emergency preparedness planning.
The one thing that will animate everyone in a crisis, and that is essentially family unification. If I could rewind on so many crises, it was that I think elected officials didn't quite understand that's actually what's animating all of us. It's the mothers trying to find their kids. It's what happened to my husband. And so understanding that that's actually what motivates people is really important, and I think maybe brings it home.
In the recovery, I think big part of that is communication. It's and that communication is both verbal, what you say to the public, and sort of the example you set. It's how you behave. It's how you comfort and how you encourage.
Start now to prepare yourself to lead in a crisis. The public is counting on you.
I think elected officials are necessary to be able to set the conditions of success in a disaster.
What I would recommend to any elected official, newly elected, is meet the team responsible for direct response, learn the plan, there is one, and ask lots of questions about it, and practice.